It is barely morning, but already the palace is breathing. Versailles doesn't sleep the way ordinary places do. The air hums with the quiet movements of men and women who have learned how to open doors without a sound, how to cross polished floors without letting a single heel click betray them. Beyond the gilded gates, Paris lies in darkness, but here the corridors already glow faintly with candlelight reflected in mirrors taller than soldiers. The sun has not yet risen, but its namesake is about to. You are standing in the grand, suffocating beauty of the king's private apartment, not the hall of mirrors that visitors will one day sigh over, not the gardens where fountains leap and statues pose for eternity. This is deeper inside, in the cluster of rooms where walls are thick, curtains thicker, and every gaze is measured like coin. You are here because you have been granted the smallest, most dangerous form of favor, proximity. The king's bed dominates the chamber. It is more than a piece of furniture. It is a monument in silk and gold. The canopy rises like a fortress, supported by carved posts twisting upward into sprays of fleur-de-lis. The drapes are pulled close, sealing in warmth and secrecy. Guards stand outside the door, but you are inside the perimeter now, breathing the same perfumed air that Louis XIV exhales in his sleep. You were told your role would be in the lever, the ceremonial rising of the king, but that word simple is the first lie of Versailles. Nothing here is simple. A lever is a choreography of glances and gestures, each one a thread in a web of politics so fine most will never see it. And this morning you are one of the flies, or perhaps the spider, depending on how careful you are. The room smells of beeswax, lavender, water, and faintly of the musk of a man who has slept wrapped in linen under heavy velvet all night. You can hear the faint tick of a clock somewhere beyond the bed curtains. Every so often, one of the king's valets shifts his weight, and the floor creaks just enough to remind you that this building, for all its marble and gold leaf, is made of wood and men's ambitions. The first part of the ritual is waiting. No one enters until the Grand Chamberlain has given permission, and he does not give it until the king signals. That signal might come with the soft pull of a bell rope, or a single cough, or sometimes nothing at all. The Chamberlain simply decides the moment has come, and you act as though the order came from the mouth of Louis himself. Today you stand perfectly still, a folded lace handkerchief in your hand, pretending not to notice the slow arrival of others into the room. They enter in order of importance. The most favored gentlemen take their places near the bed, the rest form a half-circle farther away. Every rank in France is measured in inches of proximity to that gold-embroidered pillow. The ones nearest might pass a shirt into the bedchamber, or hold the ewer of warm water for the king's face. Those farther back are here only to be seen, to prove they are still part of the daily orbit of the sun. At last, a murmur runs through the group. The Chamberlain steps forward, his voice low but carrying. The curtains part slightly, and the first shaft of morning light from the east window falls across the bed. There he is, Louis, not yet the Sun King, not yet dressed in brocade and jewels, but simply a man of middle years with tousled hair and sharp eyes that are already measuring the room. He greets a few names, not all. The ones he omits will spend the rest of the day wondering why. The ones he notices will make sure everyone else hears about it by midday. A valet steps forward with the basin, another with the towel. You are near enough to see the king's hands, elegant, nails trimmed. The hands of a man who has not held a plough or drawn a sword in decades. The ritual begins in earnest. A servant holds up the first linen shirt of the day, warmed by the fire so that the king will not feel the morning chill. The old one is whisked away, vanishing as though it never existed. Stockings are offered next, then the soft leather slippers. Each item is handled as though it were a relic, though you know the truth, there are dozens just like it in an antechamber, ready to be swapped in at a moment's notice. While this dressing unfolds, the real business of the lever takes place. In murmurs, an ambassador is admitted, bowing so deeply you think he might collapse. He presents a letter tied with a green ribbon. The king reads it while a valet adjusts his cuff. You notice the faint tightening of Louis's jaw as his eyes pass over the script. That letter will shape the day's council, perhaps even the year's alliances. You are watching history tighten its boots. From time to time, Louis speaks directly to one of the men in the room. It is never idle talk, though it may sound like it. A question about the health of a nobleman's wife might be a way of inquiring about her family's loyalty. A remark about the quality of the previous night's music might be a hint about the favor or disfavor of a court composer whose patron also happens to be an influential duke. Here, words are arrows, and the target is not always visible. You begin to understand the danger of this room. In the gardens, gossip is currency. Here, it is a weapon with a blade so fine you might not feel the cut until you are bleeding. A careless glance, an overlong pause before answering the king's question. Even the way you shift your weight can be read and remembered. And nothing is forgotten at Versailles. The sunlight has grown stronger now, spilling across the parquet floor in golden stripes. The king's coat, stiff with embroidery, is lifted into place. Jewels catch the light. A sword is buckled at his side, not for use, but for the image of command. Louis stands, and in that instant the transformation is complete. The man in the bed is gone. The Sun King is here. The lever is not over, but the most intimate part has passed. The outer doors open, and more people are admitted. Courtiers, petitioners, men who wish to be seen but not necessarily heard. The room grows warmer with bodies and perfume. The conversations multiply, a dozen threads weaving into the dais. Tapestry of favor and resentment. You step back, careful to make the retreat look like a natural shift rather than a dismissal. Already others are moving into the space you vacated, eager to edge closer to the gravitational center of the morning. You have survived your first moment at the sun's bedside, but survival here is measured in years, not days. One slip, one misjudged word, and you will find yourself cooling your heels in the distant galleries with the rest of the nobodies. The king moves toward the door that will take him to the public rooms. As he passes, he glances once in your direction. It is not a smile, not even a nod, but the eyes meet yours for the briefest heartbeat. Whether it means anything at all, you cannot tell. But for the rest of the day, you will feel the heat of that glance like sunlight on your skin. When the doors close behind him, the chamber exhales. Servants move quickly to tidy what remains. The sheets are straightened, the bed curtains drawn once more, the basin carried away. The ritual space is reset, as though nothing has happened, though every man in this room will replay it in his mind, and in whispered conversations for the rest of the day. You walk out into the corridor, the light of the outer palace seeming harsher. After the filtered glow of the king's room, the mirrors throw back your image at you, smaller than you felt inside, but still changed. You have seen the sun rise from his bed. Tomorrow, you will try to stand a little closer, and tomorrow, the game will begin again. The king has left the bedchamber, but the real day is only beginning. the lever was for the chosen few. The petty lever is for the many who must believe they are part of the inner circle, even if the truth is otherwise. Versailles thrives on layers, layers of gold leaf, of protocol, of illusions. Each layer is an orbit, and the closer you are to the sun, the more dangerous the heat. You follow the flow of movement down the corridor, toward the petty apartment du ROI. The doors are open just wide enough for invited courtiers to pass inside. Each man pauses at the threshold to bow before entering, a gesture as practiced as breathing. The air changes once you cross it, thicker with perfume, warm from the clusters of bodies, humming with the low drone of voices calculated to be overheard without seeming indiscreet. The king is seated now, dressed but not yet burdened with the full weight of ceremony. The coat is lighter, the jewels fewer, though his posture makes it clear this is no moment of relaxation. Even in these supposed private gatherings, Louis is performing, and every eye in the room is a witness. A silver tray rests on a side table, bearing a porcelain cup of steaming chocolate, dark and fragrant. You have heard that this drink is both indulgence and medicine, though you suspect here it is mostly theateron, exotic luxury from across. The sea's proof that the Sun King's reach extends to the edges of the known world. Around him, the first circle presses closer. Ministers murmur short reports, each one timed to last only as long as it takes for the king to stir his drink. A bishop leans forward to speak of a troublesome abbé whose sermons wander to near political commentary. A military officer stands, straight-backed, reporting on the condition of garrisons along the northern frontier. Each finishes with a bow, retreating just far enough to let the next step forward. You keep to the edge for now. There is a kind of safety in not rushing. To lunge for attention here is to risk looking desperate, and desperation is the scent of prey. Instead, you watch. Patterns emerge quickly. The king tilts his head slightly to the left when a remark amuses him, straightens his spine when it displeases him. He does not interrupt. He lets the pause hang just long enough for the speaker to squirm before replying. Beside you, a courtier you barely know makes a quiet observation about the lace at the king's cuff. It is a new design, imported from Venice. That tiny scrap of cloth will be discussed all morning in salons and corridors, spun into speculations about trade agreements and royal favor for Italian merchants. At Versailles, nothing is too small to be politicized. When the chocolate is gone, the king rises. The petty lever is over, but the procession to the day's first council is itself a stage. Doors are opened by men who count the number of times they touch the gilded handles. Footmen move ahead to clear the way, their livery so bright it catches in the corner of your vision like the flash of a coin. The courtiers fall into place, a shifting formation where position is everything. To walk too near the front without being invited is an insult. To lag too far behind is to admit irrelevance. You find yourself beside an older gentleman whose hair is powdered so heavily it leaves a faint cloud in the air as he moves. He is speaking softly, ostensibly about the weather, but his tone invites. You too hear something more. He remarks on the clarity of the morning sky, then adds that such clarity is a sign of a decisive day. You nod without answering. At Versailles, even the weather can be a veiled prediction about politics. The procession moves through the marble court. The sound of footsteps amplified by stone and space. Beyond the windows, you catch glimpses of the gardens, still damp with morning mist. Servants are already at work there, trimming, sweeping, ensuring that the perfection the king demands is never interrupted by fallen leaves or uneven gravel. You realize that the gardens are as much a performance as anything inside the palesa, living emblem of control. Each hedge and fountain placed to echo the order Louis imposes on his court. At the council chamber, the assembly divides. Only the ministers and a few favored advisors enter with the king. The rest remain in the antechamber, a gilded holding pen where ambition simmers. Here, the conversations grow louder, more pointed. Without the king's ear to capture, courtiers turn on each other. Alliances are tested in small, dangerous ways. A misplaced word about the queen's latest gown might be harmless gossip or the opening move in a campaign to undermine the tailor who supplies her, and by extension the noble family who patronizes him. You accept a place near one of the tall windows, partly to watch the gardens below, partly to see who approaches. A young marquis sidles over, bowing just enough to acknowledge your presence without committing to friendship. He asks if you will attend the hunting party later this week. The question is casual in tone, but exact in timing. If you decline, he will know you expect the king to summon you for something more important. If you accept, you risk being absent from the palace when a crucial opportunity arises. You answer with a non-committal smile, promising to see how the week unfolds. The Marquis's eyes narrow just slightly. He is filing your answer away for future use. At Versailles, every conversation is a ledger. From within the council chamber, you hear the low rumble of voices, occasionally punctuated by the scrape of a chair or the sharp tap of a hand on the table. No one here knows exactly what is being decided in that room, but speculation blooms like mold in the corners. A countess near the fireplace whispers that it concerns a border dispute with Spain. A chevalier insists it is about a new tax on wine merchants. Both speak with the certainty of people who will later claim to have been right, no matter the truth. When the doors finally open, the ministers file out in order, their expressions carefully neutral. The king emerges last, pausing just long enough to let the waiting crowd see him. This too is part of the performance. He lets them read his mood, though whether it is genuine or crafted is known only to him. Today, his face is calm, but his eyes are bright. Something has been decided. You can almost feel the tension shift in the room, like a current changing direction. The rest of the morning is a blur of movement. The king heads toward the chapel for mass, his steps measured, his gaze forward. You join the tide of courtiers following at a respectful distance. The chapel is a jewel box of marble and gilt, its high windows spilling colored light onto the polished floor. Here, religion and politics are inseparable. Attending Mass in the king's presence is as much a declaration of loyalty as of faith. You take your place along the side, watching as the royal family enters. The queen glances briefly toward the assembled courtiers, her face unreadable. Her position is both exalted and precarious. She must maintain dignity without overshadowing the king, must offer warmth without granting too much access. Around her, the ladies of the court arrange themselves like a living garland, each one aware of the exact angle at which her presence will be most noticed. The service is conducted with precision, every movement of the clergy timed to the rhythm of the king's. Attention, even in prayer, Versailles is a stage. When the final blessing is given, the congregation disperses in small groups, each one breaking off toward its own corner of the palace to continue the day's quieter intrigues. You find yourself drawn back toward the king's private apartments, though you know entry now will be more difficult. The closer one gets to the inner chambers after the public rituals, the more one must prove a reason for being there. You decide to take the long route through the portrait gallery. The eyes of long-dead monarchs follow you from their frames, reminders that power here is both inherited and performed. Near the far end of the gallery, you encounter a valet you recognize from the morning's lever. He inclines his head in greeting, then leans closer as if to inspect the embroidery on your sleeve. In a voice barely above a whisper, he tells you that the king has summoned only a handful of men for the afternoon council and that your name is among them. The news is delivered without expression, as though he were commenting on the weather. But you know enough to feel the quickening of your pulse. This is the opening you have been waiting for, but it is also a test, an invitation to the king's. Afternoon council is not a reward. It is a chance to prove your usefulness, and by extension your right to remain in his orbit. Fail, and you will not be invited again. You thank the valet with a nod, careful not to show too much reaction. Excitement is dangerous currency here. Spend it too freely, and you will have nothing left when you truly need it. You continue through the gallery, your mind already turning over what you know, what you have heard, and what you might say if the king asks for your opinion. Outside, the gardens are in full light now. The fountains leap, scattering rainbows. Into the air, somewhere beyond the hedges, musicians are playing for the benefit of those strolling the gravel paths. The palace glitters in the sun, every window throwing back a shard of light. It is easy to forget, in such brilliance, how much shadow hides behind the gold. By the time you return to your own quarters to prepare for the council, you understand that today's invitation will shape more than just the afternoon. It will set the course for your place at Versailles, for your survival in the heat of the sun. And as you dress once more, tightening the cuffs, smoothing the coat, you feel the same thought circling back in your mind. Proximity is power, but only if you can survive it. The hour approaches, and the corridors toward the king's private council chamber grow quieter the closer you get. The chatter of the salons fades, replaced by the muffled sound of your own steps on parquet floors, polished to a mirror's sheen. Lamps have been lit along the gallery, not because the light is needed, but because in Versailles every detail is staged. Shadows are meant to fall where they flatter, not where they occur naturally. Two guards in the blue and gold livery of the Maison du Roi stand before the council antechamber. Their halberds catch the glow of the sconces. They do not speak, only incline their heads enough to show they have noted your presence. The message is clear. You are expected. You step past them into a smaller room, its walls lined with maps and velvet-covered chairs. A few others are already here. The Minister of War, his coat heavy with embroidery, leans over a chart spread on a side table. The Controller General of Finances stands by the mantelpiece, speaking quietly to a secretary whose quill hovers, ready to capture every word. They glance up as you enter, eyes assessing, calculating how your presence will shift the balance. Of the discussion to come, the door to the inner chamber remains closed. This is the moment before the performance begins, the point at which each man rehearses his role. You find a place near the wall, close enough to see the others, but far enough to avoid drawing attention too soon. Versailles rewards those who enter conversations like dancers joining a set, never too early, never too late, always at the perfect beat. A footman in discreet grey livery opens the door at last. "Messieurs," he says, and nothing more. No announcement is needed. The invitation itself is enough. You step into the king's cabinet du Col. It is not a grand hall. The ceilings are lower here, the gilding less ostentatious, the paintings smaller. This is not the public face of the monarchy, is the mind of it. The table is oval, its surface gleaming, papers laid out in precise order. At its head sits Louis XIV, the Sun King himself, no longer the distant figure of ceremony, but the strategist, the ruler who weighs the fate of nations. He does not rise, but his gaze fixes on each man in turn as you take your places. The warmth of the morning lever is gone. Here the air is cooler, sharper. Ministers sit with measured grace, quills and inkwells ready. The only sound for a moment is the faint ticking of a clock in the corner. Louis begins without preamble. A dispatch from the ambassador in Madrid has arrived, bearing news of a treaty proposal. He speaks of its clauses with a precision that leaves no room for interruption. Only when he sets the paper down does he look to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who leans forward and begins outlining the possible advantages and dangers of acceptance. The discussion flows like a chess game. Each man makes his move, aware that the king sees the board from angles they cannot. You listen, absorbing the layers beneath the words. An agreement with Spain might strengthen the southern frontier, but it could also unsettle relations with the Dutch, whose trade Louis needs. A tax on imported wine could fill the treasury, but it risks angering the merchants whose ships bring in the cacao and coffee that fuel the court's rituals. When the king turns to you, the pause is deliberate. He lets the silence settle just enough for the others to feel it before he speaks. "Monsieur," he says, "your view. Every man at the table is watching you now. You keep your voice steady, your tone respectful but clear. You suggest that Spain's eagerness for the treaty may indicate a weakness they wish to conceal, perhaps unrest in one of their colonies, perhaps pressure from the English crown. Accepting too quickly, you say, might grant them the stability they need without ensuring equal gain for France. A measured delay, framed as a sign of careful consideration, could reveal more." The king's eyes do not flicker, but you sense the weight of his attention. He does not praise you, but he does not dismiss your point either. He shifts the conversation to the Minister of War, asking how troop movements might be adjusted should negotiations stall. The ripple of your contribution moves outward small, but discernible. The council continues, touching on matters of coinage, naval expansion, and the repair of certain provincial roads. Not every topic is grand, but each is treated with the same precision. Here, the king is not the figure in gilded armor from the tapestries. He is the mind behind the machinery, ensuring that the grandeur of Versailles rests on solid foundations. At last, Louis stands. The ministers rise in unison. He gives no formal dismissal, only a glance toward the clock, and then he has gone through a side door that leads deeper into his private apartments. The council is over. Back in the antechamber, the mood shifts immediately. Men who were silent in the king's presence now lean toward one another, voices low but urgent. Interpretations of what was said and what was left unsaid fly from mouth to ear, gaining embellishments with every retelling. You hear your own remark about Spain repeated by a marquis, who attributes it to a certain advisor close to the king, his tone suggesting both intrigue and caution. You leave before the web tightens too much. There is a temptation to linger, to listen, but you know that in Versailles, absence can sometimes speak more loudly than presence. You walk the corridors alone for a while, letting the afternoon light spill through the high windows onto the marble floors. In the gardens, the air is cooler. You descend the terrace steps, the scent of orange blossoms drifting from the orangery. A small group of courtiers walks ahead, their laughter carefully pitched to carry. Somewhere behind a hedge, A musician is practicing a bombed, the notes floating up like fragments of a dream. You pause by one of the fountains, watching the water rise and fall in perfect rhythm. The gardens are a mirror of the council. You have just left every path, every jet of water calculated to serve the design. The king's power lies not only in his presence, but in his ability to make even the air seem orchestrated. The sun is beginning to dip toward the west, its light turning the palace windows to molten gold. Tomorrow will bring another lever, another council, another round of performances in the endless theatre of Versailles. But for now, you stand in the glow, aware that you have stepped one pace closer to the center of its orbit. The question is whether you can keep that place, or whether, like so many before, you will find that the sun burns as easily as it warms. The afternoon drains away slowly at Versailles, but never quietly. Servants hurry through the lesser corridors, unseen by the court, their arms full of silver dishes, carafes of wine, piles of folded napkins starched to knife-edge stiffness. Footmen climb narrow staircases with candles, lighting the palace from within, so that when night comes, there will be no moment of darkness, only the illusion that the day has extended itself at the king's command. You know where you must be. The evening's entertainment will be held in the Salon des Diane, though salon is far too modest a word for a room whose marble columns gleam like moonlight, and whose ceiling is painted with hunting scenes, so vivid you almost hear the hounds baying. But before the music and the laughter comes another kind of gathering, quieter, sharper. In a corner antechamber off the grand hallway, a cluster of courtiers speaks in hushed tones, their heads bent close. You are drawn in, not by invitation, but by the natural gravity of any knot of power in this place. They are speaking of the council's earlier session, a few words about the Spanish treaty, wrapped in the language of concern but laced with ambition. One man, the Comte de ****, says he believes the king favors delay. Another counters that he overheard the Minister of War remark on the advantage of swift acceptance. Every voice here is rehearsing its argument for the next audience, testing it against the reactions of others. In Versailles, even the truth is tried on like a coat, to see how it fits. A footman appears in the doorway. Messieurs, Madame the King will soon be in the salon. The knot of conversation loosens, each participant gliding away to the light and music, as though nothing had passed between them but pleasantries. The Salon de Diane is already glowing. Chandeliers blaze overhead, each crystal drop catching the candlelight and multiplying it until the air seems thick with gold. Musicians in the corner tune violins and test the harpsichord's keys. The murmur of voices swells as more guests arrive, and then he is there. Louis enters, not as a man walking into a room, but as the event itself. Every face turns toward him, every spine straightens. He moves slowly enough to be seen, but without hesitation, acknowledging bows with a glance, a faint tilt of the head. His coat tonight is deep crimson, the gold embroidery so fine it could be mistaken for sunlight trapped in thread. He takes his place near the hearth, and the room's energy rearranges itself around him. The first piece of music begins lively. Alamandand conversations bloom in its shelter. You find yourself beside a marquise whose fan moves in slow, deliberate arcs. She speaks of the latest arrival from Paris, a shipment of Venetian glass for the king's private table. But beneath her words is another message, a request for your opinion on whether certain merchants might be worth the king's notice. Across the room, two dukes stand almost back to back, speaking to different groups, yet somehow conducting a dialogue through glances and raised eyebrows. One of them catches your eye briefly, as if to measure whether you might serve as a conduit for whatever silent negotiation is taking place. The music shifts to a slower air, and with it the conversations deepen. Here, in the evening's glow, alliances are forged not in the blunt exchanges of counsel, but in the delicate layering of compliment, anecdote, and suggestion. A remark about the beauty of the gardens might lead to an offer of shared hunting rights. A question about a family's health might be the first step toward a marriage arrangement. A servant glides past with a tray of wine. You take a glass, not for thirst, but to have something to hold. In a room where every gesture is noticed, an idle hand is dangerous. It might be read as hesitation, or worse, disinterest, at the far end of the salon. The Comte de **** is speaking to the king. You cannot hear the words, but you can read the posture. Slightly forward, voice pitched low, one hand making a small, precise movement. Louis listens, unmoving, then responds with a single sentence. The Comte bows and withdraws, his face unreadable. The first part of the evening ends with the king's signal, a shift of weight, a glance toward the musicians. The last notes fade, and he rises. The path clears without anyone seeming to step aside. He walks toward the grand staircase, and like planets drawn by gravity, the court follows. Supper is served in the Salle du Grand Couvert, a theatre of dining, in which the king and certain members of the royal family eat in full view of invited guests. Tonight, the table gleams with silver-gilt plates, the candlelight reflected in polished covers that are lifted in perfect unison by liveried servants. The dishes are as much a performance as the music that preceded them. Roasted pheasant with a sheen of glaze, delicate pastries filled with almond cream, bowls of sugared fruit so vivid they might have been painted. The king eats slowly, each bite deliberate, as if reminding all present that the sun does not hurry. Guests speak in low voices during the meal, the sound a steady undertone beneath the soft clink of silver on porcelain. You catch fragments of talk, plans for a hunt, a rumor about a bishop's sudden illness, a whispered jest that draws a suppressed laugh. When the final dish is cleared and the king rises, the room stands as one. He departs as he arrived, surrounded by the quiet choreography of guards and attendants. Only when he is gone does the court dissolve into smaller constellations, each drifting toward private salons, gaming tables, or the whispering darkness of the gardens. You choose the gardens. The air is cooler now, scented with night flowers. Lanterns glow along the main paths, their light pooling on gravel walks. Beyond them, the palace looms a vast golden geometry against the deepening sky. A small group has gathered by the edge of the Grand Canal. Their laughter carries, but the words do not. You recognize one or two faces from the council. Their presence here proved that the real business of Versailles does not end with the king's departure. It only becomes less visible. You linger at a distance, the damp air from the water brushing your face. Somewhere inside the palace, music still plays. Here, the night is quieter, the intrigue softer but no less potent. You think of the day's events, from the morning's lever to the council chamber, from the glittering salon to this shadowed edge of the gardens, and you feel the pull of the orbit tightening. In Versailles, the sun never truly sets. It only hides, waiting for the next morning to rise again. By the time you return from the gardens, Versailles has shifted into another version of itself. The grandeur is still here, but it has changed its costume. The corridors are quieter now, though never deserted. Footsteps echo in a different way. At night, softer but somehow more pronounced against marble floors. The light, too, has changed. The chandeliers along the hall of mirrors have been lowered, their candles trimmed to smaller flames that burn with a steady, almost intimate glow as you walk. The mirrored walls catch your reflection again and again, each one slightly altered by the curve of the glass and the angle of the light. Your image moves alongside others, a passing servant with a covered tray, a young courtier hurrying by with a sealed letter in hand, a guard who stands too still to be casual. You notice how in this dimmed light, faces reveal more than they intend, the tired set of a jaw, the flicker of irritation in someone's eyes, the sharp, measuring look cast over a shoulder before disappearing into another hallway. The official entertainments are over, but Versailles is not asleep. The palace after nightfall is a labyrinth of private gatherings, each with its own rules and temperature. Some rooms blaze with candles, their laughter spilling into the hallways. Others keep their doors half shut, letting only the faintest hum of voices escape, as if holding in a secret too fragile for the open air. It is in these dimmer rooms that the true conversations happen, not about the menu for tomorrow's supper or the next hunt, but about alliances, debts, rivalries, and the king's shifting favor. Drawn by instinct as much as curiosity, you move toward the Salon de Mars. The heavy door is open just enough to reveal a warm haze of candlelight and the rich scent of tobacco. Inside, a small gaming table gleams under the light, its surface scattered with cards and coins. 5 players sit around it, their faces as carefully arranged as their wigs and cuffs. Here, the game is not only about winning or losing. In Versailles, loss can be as powerful as victory if it is done with elegance. To drop a handful of gold coins without a flicker of regret is to remind the room of your resources, your confidence, and your indifference to petty gain. Among the players, you recognize the Comte de ****, his voice low and even as he lays down a winning hand. Across from him, a lady in a gown of dark silk watches him with the stillness of a predator waiting to see if the prey will falter. When the round ends, the Comte rises and drifts to the edge of the room where a woman with pearls woven into her hair is waiting. Their conversation is quiet, their faces giving away nothing, but you notice the way the Comte leans in just slightly, the way the lady's eyes glance once toward the gaming table and then toward the doorway. That glance is not accidental. From the hallway beyond comes a sudden burst of music, a harpsichord's crisp notes, followed by a peal of laughter. You step away from the game and follow the sound to a smaller, more intimate chamber you have not entered before. Here, the air feels different. Less show, more calculation. A small circle of chairs surrounds a table set with crystal decanters and cut glass. The scent of brandy drifts in the warm air. This gathering is quieter but sharper. The conversation is about the Spanish treaty again, but stripped of the polite caution shown in daylight. Names are spoken openly, some with admiration, others with open dismissal. A man in a pale waistcoat leans forward, suggesting that Spain's ambassador might be encouraged to offer more favorable terms if a rumor of English interference were allowed to drift, unchallenged, into the right ears. A woman in a deep green gown counters that the ambassador is too cautious to be swayed. By mere gossip, he must be made to believe that the English crown has already taken steps to undermine France's position. There is laughter at that, not because it is amusing, but because, in this room, such maneuvers are considered an art. Someone pours more brandy, and the liquid catches the light in a slow amber ribbon. You take a seat at the edge of the circle, saying little, your silence, accepted as a kind of currency. In this hour, too many words can be dangerous. The ones you keep may be more valuable than the ones you give away. The palace grows warmer as the night deepens. The candles burn lower, sending up threads of smoke that coil toward painted ceilings. Servants come and go without being summoned. Their movements quieter now, more like shadows than people. A tray of fresh glasses appears at your elbow. A plate of sugared almonds replaces an empty dish without a word. Beyond the chamber's windows, the gardens are silvered under moonlight. The fountains are still, their basins dark mirrors reflecting the pale glow of lanterns along the main walk. You imagine that somewhere beyond sight, along one of those lantern-lit paths, another group is meeting in just as much secrecy, a reminder that no matter where you are in Versailles, the real conversation is always happening elsewhere as well. Eventually, you find yourself in a quieter corridor that leads toward the king's private apartments. You will not go further. Few do, but even here the air feels heavier, as if the very walls know they are closer to the center of power. The guards stand at their posts, their stillness almost unnatural. Somewhere beyond those closed doors, Louis may be asleep, or he may be working by lamplight, reviewing documents or dictating letters that will set the tone for tomorrow's court. You pause there, not to eavesdrop. There is nothing to hear but to take in the sense of distance. The king's presence fills Versailles even when he is invisible. The way the moon controls the tides without touching the sea. When you turn back toward your own rooms, the corridors feel emptier, though the palace is never truly at rest. Somewhere a door closes softly. Somewhere else a laugh rises and then stops abruptly. You carry the night's images with you, the pearls in the lady's hair, the whispered strategies over brandy, the knowing glance toward a doorway. By the time you reach your chambers, the last of the corridor candles is flickering low, the wax pooling round its base. You stand for a moment before snuffing it out, letting the darkness settle like a cloak, and you realize that here, in this orbit, around the sun, the court's day never truly ends. It only changes shape, waiting for the next dawn to begin the cycle again. Dawn does not so much arrive at Versailles as it is orchestrated. The first pale light touches the gilded rooftops long before it reaches the corridors below, where the air still holds the faint, mingled scents of last night, tobacco, beeswax, brandy, and something sharper, like ambition that has not yet cooled. The palace is already awake when you rise. Servants move with quiet precision, carrying in fresh logs for the fireplaces, setting out silver basins for washing, opening the tall windows to let in the faintly chilled air. The sound of their work is like the tuning of an instrument before the music begins, soft but constant, the signal that another performance is about to start. You make your way toward the Salon de l'Oil de Bouffe, the antechamber to the king's bedchamber. This is where the day's choreography truly begins. Courtiers arrive in careful sequence, each hoping to position themselves where the king's gaze might fall for a moment longer than on the others. The rustle of silk mixes with the low murmur of polite greetings, though beneath the civility runs a sharper undercurrent, the sorting of who is favored today, who is ignored, and who is spoken to with the kind of courtesy that is more dangerous than an insult. It is here that fragments of last night's conversations begin to surface. You hear them in passing, a mention of the Spanish ambassador's mood, the quiet speculation about whether the Comte de *** will be invited to the next hunting party. The murmured observation that Madame *** was seen leaving the Salon de Mars far later than expected. Each phrase is like a thread pulled from a much larger tapestry, and you cannot help but imagine how they will be woven together by the end of the day. When the doors to the king's chamber finally open, the room stills. Louis steps into view, not in the full splendor of state, but already dressed with deliberate elegance, every fold, every jeweled clasp exactly where it should be. His face is calm, but his eyes move with the same precision as his steps, noting everything. He exchanges brief words with those closest to his path, his voice measured, his expression unreadable. You watch as the Duc de Saint-Aignan leans in to speak softly to the king. The words are too low to catch, but you see the faint lift of the king's eyebrow before he replies. Whatever was said, it is enough to send the duke stepping back with the satisfaction of a man who has secured something, a favor granted, perhaps, or the promise of an audience later in the day. The formalities continue, petitions presented, invitations extended, a discreet inquiry about the weather for tomorrow's ride. But beneath it all, the undercurrent from the night before persists. You see it in the sideways glances between courtiers, in the half-smiles exchanged when a certain name is mentioned, in the slight shifting of positions in the room as alliances realign themselves by the minute. When the king departs for the council chamber, the flow of the court changes again. Some follow immediately, eager to remain within reach of the day's decisions. Others drift into nearby salons, where the first trays of chocolate and small pastries have been set out. You choose a quieter route, passing through the long gallery where the sunlight now spills across the floor in wide bands, illuminating motes of dust that dance like tiny actors in their own silent performance. From here, you can hear the faint echo of a harpsichord somewhere in the distance, its melody warm and slow, as if the player has no audience but themselves. The sound carries through the stillness, a reminder that within the vast machinery of Versailles there are always smaller, private rhythms playing alongside the great public ones. A footman passes with a sealed letter on a silver tray, the wax unbroken. Without meaning to, you glance at the crest pressed into the seal, not the king's, but one you recognize from last night's conversation in the small chamber beyond the Salon de Mars. You do not ask where it is going. The knowledge is unnecessary. In Versailles, seeing is often enough. By mid-morning, the palace is fully alive. Sunlight flashes on polished floors and gilded frames. Laughter rings from the open doors of the larger salons, and the scent of freshly cut flowers fills the air. Yet beneath all of it, the threads from last night continue to weave themselves into the day's fabric. A smile given here, a remark withheld there, the smallest of gestures, but in this place, they are often the ones that determine who will rise and who will vanish into the background. As you move through the gallery, you understand something more clearly than you did the night before. Versailles is not just a palace, nor merely the stage for the king's authority. It is a living tapestry, and every hour adds a new thread. Some are gold, some are darker, and some are so fine they can only be seen when the light catches them at the right angle. You are in it now, whether you choose to weave or to be woven. By the time the sun stands high over Versailles, the palace feels different again. Morning's ordered elegance has given way to something brighter, more exposed. The corridors are warmer now, touched by shafts of light that pour through the tall windows, glancing off polished floors and gilded moldings. Every detail is sharper in this light. the shimmer of a jewel at a lady's throat, the faint lines of fatigue at a courtier's eyes, the precise angle of a bow that is courteous, but not deferential. The gardens outside are alive with motion. Through the open windows you can hear the distant crunch of gravel as guests stroll the main paths, their voices rising and falling in measured cadences. The clipped hedges cast narrow strips of shadow, and beyond them the fountains throw arcs of water into the air that catch the sunlight like fragments of crystal. Somewhere farther off, a hunting horn sounds a reminder that the king's attention is never fixed in one place for long. Inside, the salons are fuller now. The salon de Diane, where a pair of enormous windows flood the room with afternoon light, has become the center of the moment. A group gathers near the billiard table, not to play, but to watch. The Comte de **** leans casually against the carved frame, speaking to a small circle of listeners. His tone is easy, even charming, but there is weight in his words, a recounting of some detail from the council meeting that morning, which, though harmless on the surface, is shaped to suggest more than it says. Those listening nod with interest, but their eyes keep flicking toward the door, alert to new arrivals. Across the room, a lady in a gown of pale yellow silk sits at a small writing desk. She appears absorbed in a letter, her pen moving steadily across the page, yet her position allows her to hear everything spoken near the billiard table. Now and again, she pauses, as if searching for the right word, but her stillness feels more like listening than writing. Not far away, a quieter corner has gathered its own small audience. Here, a man in a dark coat is explaining in the polite, rounded phrases of Versailles why certain investments in the Spanish ports may no longer be wise. His listeners exchange brief glances, the kind that travel faster than words, carrying both agreement and unease. You can almost feel the way the conversation might drift later, in another room, into something more pointed. The air itself seems to thicken as the day advances. The perfume of the flowers in the vases is stronger now, mingling with the scent of polished wood and the faint metallic temps of candle snuffers left on side tables. Servants move more slowly in the heat, though their faces remain composed. A tray of cooled wine is carried into the room, the glasses beading with condensation that leaves faint rings on the polished surface of a nearby cabinet. When the king enters, unannounced, as he sometimes chooses to, the atmosphere shifts. Instantly, Louis is dressed for the afternoon, his coat of deep blue velvet catching the sunlight with every movement. His entrance is not loud, yet it is felt by everyone in the room, like a sudden change in the wind. Conversations pause just long enough to acknowledge his presence before resuming in tones adjusted for proximity. The king speaks briefly with the Comte, listening without reaction, then turns to the lady in yellow silk. Their exchange is short, but warm enough to be noticed. When he departs as quietly as he came, the air fills again with the murmur of talk, but now the tone has changed, sharpened by the memory of his passing. Later, you walk through the hall of mirrors, where the sunlight floods the length of the gallery, scattering across its gilded frames and vast panels of glass. In this fierce light, the mirrors are merciless. They reflect every movement, every tilt of the head, every half-smile exchanged between those who think themselves unnoticed. You catch your own reflection among them and realize how easily one becomes part of the spectacle here, whether intended or not. In the distance, bells begin to ring, marking the hour. The afternoon still has many turns left to take, and you sense that before the day ends, one of the whispered currents from the morning will break the surface. Versailles does not often reveal its hand in daylight, but when it does, the ripples can be seen from one end of the palace to the other. By late afternoon, the light at Versailles changes. It loses the sharp brilliance of midday and becomes warmer, heavier, leaning toward gold. The shadows lengthen across the marble floors, and the gilded moldings along the ceilings catch the sun at an angle that seems almost theatrical. The palace begins its slow turn toward evening. The gardens outside glow with the last strong light of the day. From the upper windows, you can see the Grand Canal glinting in the distance, narrow, boats moving lazily along its length. The air beyond the walls carries the mingled sense of clipped boxwood, fresh water, and the faint sweetness of crushed grass. Below, a small procession moves along one of the main paths, a pair of ladies with attendants, trailed by two younger courtiers walking at a pace just slow enough to remain within earshot. Even at this distance, you sense the shape of the conversation, part politeness, part calculation. Inside, the palace shifts again. The larger salons thin as people drift toward the smaller, more shaded rooms where the air is cooler and the voices are lower. The salon de musique becomes one such refuge. Here, the afternoon's heat is softened by the pale green draperies drawn across the tall windows. A harpsichord stands in the corner, its lid painted with pastoral scenes, and a young musician plays, a slow air that seems to draw the room into its rhythm. Seated near the instrument, the Marquise d** listens with a stillness that is not entirely about the music. Every so often her eyes lift toward the door, watching who enters and who leaves. Across from her, the Vicomte, a man whose wit is known to travel faster than his caution, leans back in his chair, speaking in undertones to the Comtesse at his side. Their words are hidden, but their expressions are not. Amusement, calculation, the faint tightening of the mouth when another name is mentioned elsewhere. In the dimmer corridors that connect the salons, brief encounters pass almost unseen. Two men exchange a folded note without breaking stride. A woman pauses at the base of a staircase, pretending to adjust her glove while her eyes follow someone ascending. These moments are gone in seconds, but at Versailles, seconds are often enough. By the time you reach the Galerie des Glaces again, the light has shifted further. The mirrors now reflect not only the gold of the setting sun, but the first hints of the lamps being lit. A few servants move quickly along the gallery, trimming wicks and setting fresh candles in the great chandeliers. The scent of hot wax mingles with the fading warmth of the day from the far end of the gallery. The doors to the Salon de la Paix are open. Inside, a small supper is being laid. Not the grand feast of state, but an invitation-only table where the talk will be as carefully chosen as the dishes. Already, a few guests are present, speaking with the easy confidence of those who know they have been placed where the king's absence is only temporary. You step inside, greeted by the cool glint of silver and the faint aroma of roasted game. The table itself is a display: bowls of fresh cherries, small tarts dusted with sugar, carafes of pale wine catching the last rays of sunlight through the windows. At one end, a seat remains empty, waiting for someone who has not yet arrived. The absence is noticed, though not remarked upon. The conversation here is lighter than in the council or the gaming tables. Yet the edges are no less sharp. A jest about the Spanish ambassador's handwriting draws laughter, but the laughter lingers just a moment too long, as if testing who might take offense. A comment about the hunting season drifts seamlessly into speculation about the king's travel plans. Nothing is stated plainly, but every word feels positioned. Outside the windows, the gardens are dimming into twilight. The fountains still play, their white spray lit by the last traces of the sun, but the deeper paths are already in shadow. Somewhere far off, a single bell sounds, marking the turn toward evening. As the supper continues, you realize the day's undercurrents are not dissipating, they are tightening. By nightfall, some will surface, drawn upward by the pull of the gathering darkness. Versailles moves always in cycles, but the transitions from light to shadow, from public to private, are where the true shape of the court can be seen. And tonight, the shape is already changing. Night settles over Versailles, not in silence, but in a deepening of sound. The last calls of the garden birds are replaced by the measured toll of the hour. The fountains take on a heavier, echoing tone. And from somewhere beyond the Grand Canal comes the faint beat of hooves, riders returning late, their approach swallowed by the night air. The palace glows from within. Light spills from tall windows into the darkness, gold against black. Up close, the candles are a world of their own, flames caught in crystal drops, reflected endlessly in mirrors and gilt. The corridors hum with a different kind of movement now. In the day, passage from one salon to another was a matter of position. At night, it is a matter of purpose. Every step taken now has intent behind it, whether to seek, to avoid, or to be seen in the Salon de Pauline. The king holds a smaller, more intimate audience. The air here is warm with wax and perfume, the shadows softened by candlelight. Louis listens more than he speaks, his head slightly inclined, hands resting on the gilded arms of his chair. One courtier presents a petition with studied humility. Another, less formally, offers a witticism that earns a faint but unmistakable smile. The room holds its breath at that smile, for it is the kind that can change the temperature of the court for weeks to come. Beyond this chamber, the palace divides into pockets of light and dark. The Salon de Mars is alive with gaming, the rattle of dice, the crisp slide of cards, the low voices of players who win and lose fortunes in a single hand. Here, faces are more animated, gestures sharper. A man's sleeve brushes another's arm as cards are dealt. The touch looks accidental, but the glance that follows says otherwise. Farther down a quieter corridor, the mood shifts entirely. In a small panelled room lit by just 3 candles, 2 figures sit opposite each other at a round table. No servants are present. Their voices are low but steady, the kind used when words must be weighed and remembered exactly. On the table lies an open map, its surface shadowed by their bent heads. One of them gestures toward a marked route. The other nods once, then folds the map away before the conversation moves to something lighter, or perhaps only seems to dot in. The gardens, the darkness is almost complete, broken only by the pale gleam of moonlight on water and the glow of a few lanterns carried along the paths. Here, away from the crowded salons, private meetings take on a different character. The air is cooler, scented with damp earth and late blooming flowers. From the edge of a hedge, you hear laughter, not the open public kind, but the quick, breathless kind that dies away as soon as footsteps approach. Back inside, the Hall of Mirrors has transformed entirely. In daylight, it was a stage. At night, it is an illusion. The mirrors double and triple the candlelight until the gallery seems to float in its own golden haze. A small group stands at the far end, speaking in tones too low to carry, but there, movements are caught over and over in the glass. A tilt of the head, the lift of a hand, the shifting of weight from one foot to another. It is like watching both the truth and its reflection at the same time, never certain which is which. The hour grows late. Servants move more quietly now, collecting empty glasses, drawing heavy curtains across the tall windows. Some guests begin to withdraw, their absence marked only by the closing of a door or the fading of voices down a corridor. Others linger, knowing that the later the hour, the fewer the witnesses, and the freer the words. Somewhere, beyond your sight, tonight's true decisions are being made. A promise sealed with a clasp of hands, a warning given in the safety of shadows, a silence maintained because it is more valuable than anything that could be spoken aloud. At Versailles, the night is not an ending. It is another beginning, one that unfolds without ceremony, without audience, yet carries into the morning all the same. The palace has thinned to whispers. Somewhere far down the eastern corridors, a single door closes with a muted thud, and then even that sound is gone. Versailles, so vast in daylight, feels smaller now, as if the silence has folded the walls. In toward the center, the great salons stand empty. The air still holds the scent of extinguished candles, faint and metallic, mixed with traces of perfume and wine. The floors are marked with the day's passage, a scuff here, a faint trail of dust near the baseboards, the kind of details no one notices when the rooms are full. Only a few remain awake. In the king's private apartments, a last exchange lingers. Louis sits with two of his closest advisors, the light from a single candelabrum pooling on the table between them. Papers lie spread out, a sealed letter, a list of names, a short report written in a hurried hand. No one raises their voice. Every word is measured, the kind meant to carry beyond the night. When the king finally stands, the meeting dissolves. Instantly, each man disappearing into the darkened corridors by a different route in the gardens. The fountains have fallen silent. The air is cool, damp with the first edge of morning. Along the paths, lanterns gutter low, their light barely reaching the clipped hedges. Somewhere in the distance, a lone guard walks his slow circuit, his boots crunching faintly on the gravel. The hall of mirrors is darker now than at any other time of day. The moon has set, and the mirrors catch only what little light comes from the corridor sconces. The vast space seems stripped of its performance. Without the brilliance of candles or the press of courtiers, the gallery feels almost like a shell, an echo of itself. You walk its length and hear only the faint sound of your own steps, multiplied by glass into a kind of ghostly applause. Near the Queen's apartments, a servant moves quietly with a bundle of linen, eyes fixed ahead. Behind him, two women stand at a window, looking out toward the eastern horizon. Their voices are too low to hear, but their posture speaks of something unfinished, a thought that will carry into the day to come. And then, at last, the first pale light begins to show. It slips in under the edges of the curtains, turns the marble floors cold silver, and reveals the shape of the gardens beyond the windows. The air feels different now, thinner, as if the whole palace is holding its breath before the machinery of day begins again. For a moment, Versailles is neither the dazzling court of midday nor the shadowed stage of night. It is simply a place between hours, caught in the fragile stillness before the first summons, the first audience, the first whisper of intrigue. By the time the sun lifts clear above the treetops, the palace will be alive again. Footsteps in the corridors, music from the salons, the quiet strike of chess pieces, the turning of heads when the king enters a room. The cycle will begin anew. But for now, in this last quiet moment, Versailles rests, and the echoes of the day just past. Every glance, every word, every silence wait to be carried forward, unseen but not forgotten.